Mental Health Monday with Mick Coyle.
This is Radio City Talk.
Yeah, Mental Health Monday is back for another week. My name is Mick Coyle. I do hope you're well, and we are talking this week at the start of Mental Health Awareness Week. So there's loads to discuss on the programme today. We'll also be joined by Mark Williams, who takes a keen interest in the mental health of dads. He's been on the show before, but he's visiting Liverpool, so he said, pop along to the tower, join us in the studio, and we can have a conversation about being a dad and your mental health around it, and the wider conversation going on around mental health today. There's some new findings that have been released this week ahead of Mental Health Awareness Week. We're going to chat about them in just a few moments' time. People over the age of 55 report experiencing better mental health than average. People aged 55 and above are the most likely to take positive steps to help themselves deal better with everyday life. Things like new interests, getting enough sleep, eating healthily and learning new things. So what can we learn from the life of the over 55s? More than 4 in 10 people, according to a new survey out this week, say they've experienced depression, and over a quarter of people say they have experienced panic attacks. The most noticeable differences are associated with household income and economic activity, with nearly 3 in 4 people living in the lowest household income bracket report having experienced a mental health problem. This is the world we live in 2017. Let's get a take on this with Cal Strode from the Mental Health Foundation. Cal, thank you for your time. Thanks for joining us on Mental Health Monday.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mick.
It's interesting. First and foremost, I picked out the stats about the over 55s. Is that something that they're deciding to do themselves? They're taking extra steps, or is that just the way that their life is meant? Maybe they got a little bit spare time now. They're able to take up new activities, new challenges. Kids are moved out. They can relax and enjoy themselves.
Yeah, I think that's certainly part of it. When people reach that age, they have more time and space to do the things that we know support good mental health. And a lot of these things, they sound, almost a bit patronizing when we say them. It's eat well, get some exercise, do all these things. And it sounds like common sense, but the fact is a lot of us forget to do these things.
Yeah, and I think as well, it'd be odd, wouldn't it, to say they're doing it for their own mental health, but actually they're doing it for their own well-being, because they think, you know what, I want to do something that makes me feel good, and that's what mental health and well-being is all about.
Definitely. They've got to the stage in life where they can start taking a step back and just thinking, what do I want to get out of life? What do I want to do to improve how I'm feeling right now? And we've seen from the stats that some of the people who have the biggest pressures on their mental health are mothers with large households. So they're constantly taking on the emotional burden of everyone else in the household and sometimes forgetting themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, isn't it, when you look at that figure and say 3 in 4 people living in the lowest household income bracket report having experienced a mental health problem, compared to 6 in 10, that's 3 in 5, in the highest household income bracket as well. When it is skewed against people without money, it makes you wonder sort of whether it's a much wider issue, a societal issue, than we actually give it credit for.
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely a much wider societal issue. Like you say, there are inequalities in the mental health across the nation, and there are things that go on to undermine different groups of people, their mental health, and one of them groups is the low-income group. So we need to be thinking about what more as a nation we can be doing and what we can be asking of the next government as well to ensure that their policies don't undermine mental health and they support us to have good mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. A quarter of people say they've experienced panic attacks. 4 in 10 people say they've experienced depression. These are stark findings. 4 in 10 is nearly half, isn't it? We're getting to that point where we're talking about nearly half of all people are experiencing negative mental health aspects within their life.
Yeah, definitely. So the key thing with this is it is looking at mental health across our lifetimes. So it might be when we reach a kind of pressure point in our lives, maybe we lose a loved one, maybe we lose our job. There are times in life when we're all going to be under a bit more strain. And what our survey's shown today is that the majority of us, 2 in 3, are likely to experience a mental health problem at some point. So I think it's about kind of moving the conversation beyond thinking about, us and then people who experience mental health problems, because this is about us all.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you about your findings here. It says here nearly 2/3 of people say they've experienced a mental health problem. This rises to 7 in every 10 women, young adults aged 18 to 34, and people living alone. So that's women, on average, have mental health problems ahead of the average rest of the population.
Yeah, definitely. Now, part of this could be that women are more likely to be open about their mental health and more likely to report when they are experiencing mental health problems. We know that it's particularly difficult to get men support because they are more likely to internalize things and feel like they need to go things alone. But when suicide's the biggest killer of men in the middle life age groups, we need to be questioning what more as a culture we can do to challenge kind of toxic ideas about what it means to be a man in today's world so that people get help when they need it.
Yeah, but actually, according to those figures, actually those that really target demographic, young adults 18 to 34, actually you can put also all women into that demographic of being particularly at risk from a mental health problem, and that's that is literally half the population of the country.
Yeah, definitely. I'm with 18 to 34-year-olds. Again, this could be more of a willingness to talk about what they're going through. We've seen huge cultural shifts. We've been doing Mental Health Awareness Week for over 16 years now, and in that time, we've seen public perceptions and attitudes towards mental health shift massively, and we've had the recent campaign from the Young Royals with the Heads Together campaign, and they've made mental health their priority. So I think that the kind of collective impact of all of this awareness that has been raised has started to translate into a real change where people feel more able to talk about their mental health and get support. But we need to make sure that the support is actually there now, because that's the next step. We know that services are underfunded and that people are waiting sometimes up to 6 months to get any help at all.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got Cal Strode with us from the Mental Health Foundation. This week is Mental Health Awareness Week, and the theme for this week is surviving or thriving. There's a report that you've got out, and it's got some sort of difficult words in it, which, I think when people hear this, they'll think, oh, this is huge, or this is bigger than we thought. The survey suggests our collective mental health is deteriorating. Overall, most of us report experiencing a mental health problem in our lifetime. Young adults report this at a higher level, despite having had fewer years in their lives to experience this. Our collective mental health is deteriorating. That's a path we're on there. That's a dangerous path to get away from, isn't it?
Definitely. I mean, when you look at the findings, only a small minority of Brits, I think it's 13%, are living with what we would describe as high levels of positive mental health. So we need to have a think about the things in society that are undermining our mental health. There's this sense that uncertainty is the new normal with everything that's happened with Brexit and the rise of Trump and the alt-right and things like that. So I think these kind of world events could certainly be having an impact on us as well. Add that to the difficult economic situation. It's more difficult than ever for young people to get on the housing ladder. Going to university, getting a degree, it's no longer a kind of, I think it's a success. It's more like vague directions to the train station, and you've still got a long way to go when you graduate now. Yeah,
absolutely. And I know as part of your organisation, you come up with 5 steps for a mentally thriving UK. I mean, you could probably take a million years to define how you mentally thrive, but just set up for us how you think these steps might take us a little bit closer to being in a much better position come the time we do this again in 2018.
Well, I think the first thing we need parliaments to be doing an annual report each year where they take a look at the mental health of the nation, and they're just honest. They say if it's deteriorating, they say if things have started to improve, and you'll be able to see the direct impact of all of this funding that's supposed to be going into services. At the moment, we have a survey every 7 years called the Adult Psychiatric Morbidity Survey, and to measure something as fundamental and as crucial to how we do as a nation, as mental health once every 7 years, it's just not good enough. We need annual reports so that we can track the mental health of the nation, so we can respond to the challenges that we're facing.
Oh, absolutely. If people want to find out more about the work that you guys are doing this week, or they want to read the report themselves, Surviving or Thriving, Cal, where do they need to head to?
Yeah, just head over to the Mental Health Foundation's website, so that's mentalhealth.org.uk, or you can follow us on Twitter. We're just at Mental Health.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you for your time today. Thanks for joining us on Radio City Talk.
Great. Thanks, Mick. Bye.
There you go. That's Cal Strode, who works at Mental Health Foundation. It's Mental Health Awareness Week this week. I know a lot of people have been getting in contact with the station in recent weeks about mental health story. We thank you for sending those across. We try and feature as many of the stories as we can. If you've got a story that you want to send in, please do so. You can send it in via mick@radiocity.co.uk. That's mick@radiocity.co.uk. And we could be talking about your story if there's an event you're involved in, or maybe you just want to offer some thoughts on something you've heard on the programme. More than happy to read out your emails. Just wanted to mention something which people have sort of tagged me in and just linked me into it via social media. Piers Morgan talking about being mentally ill in regard to a Brad Pitt interview. He tweeted earlier saying, I just read Brad Pitt's GQ interview. It made me cringe. He's not mentally ill. He just needs to man up. He talks about the fact that Paul Gascoigne had been on his programme. He said, I'd never tell mentally ill people to man up, but I would say to a mentally healthy people who shirk dealing with normal life issues. He says, I'm allergic to celebrity, disingenuously playing the victim card. Simple as that. And take your pick from that one. Somebody asked him, how do you stay so positive? He says, I man up. I think sometimes like that, it's a little bit unhelpful. There might be a story in a newspaper or a magazine which spins a story in a certain way, which creates drama around somebody's life. And from that, it might be intimated that, there is an addiction issue or there is an issue around OCD. And, what happens in the past and has happened in the past, that person gets labelled as being bonkers or, a psycho or somebody who needs to be locked up and put into an insane asylum. And that is the sort of culture that we've had in this country for years and years and years. That, you can't cope. What do you mean you can't? Oh, send for the men in white coats, the straitjackets and all that kind of stuff. Padded cells. Yeah, that's the sort of thing that people who work in the mental health field are dealing with. That there is a presumption that if somebody says, you know what, I've been struggling. I've been struggling because I've been feeling down. I've been struggling with depression or stress or anxiety. I can't cope. And as a result of that, I turn to drink. As a result of that, that fed into addictions. And it might be drinking. In Brad Pitt's case, it might be gambling. It might be OCD. It might be all sorts of different things. It might be video games. People get caught up in these things. And then Piers Morgan shows up. Piers Morgan, who's paid to have opinions. And he goes, just man up. But, you think... It's like saying to somebody, that thing that you are, that thing who you feel like you've become, that thing that you think that has taken over your life and defined you as a person, maybe throughout your entire adult life, don't be that anymore. Now, if it was that easy, Piers Morgan, there wouldn't be a mental health crisis in the country. You'd just simply have everybody manning up. And how do you man up? How do you man up? What? You go and build a shelf or something like that? Is that how you man up? If you have got issues around mental health based on, losing a family member or a loved one, if you've got issues around your mental health in regard to a job that you're struggling to keep up with in terms of the workload that you're dealing with, that you never see your family, you don't have any spare time, you don't have any spare cash, life is getting on top of you. Maybe you've got post-natal depression. Maybe you had post-traumatic stress disorder from seeing, friends and colleagues in Iraq and Afghanistan being blown up in front of you. You're going to tell that person to man up? Put yourself together. These people have got complicated lives. This idea that you go, man up. What does that actually mean? And I think, Piers Morgan is paid to have an opinion, so that's the opinion that he's expressed. But this is exactly what I'm talking about when I talk about mental health in the wider context. That you can't just say to somebody, well, don't be depressed then. Well, don't be sad then. Well, why don't you try smiling once in a while? These things do not work, and these things have been tried, and now we're starting to get to the point where organisations and charities and the NHS are trying to get their heads around just how huge this whole thing is. Piers Morgan comes along, solves all everybody's problems by saying, you know what, you need to man up. Piers Morgan, I think you need to shut up.
Mental Health Monday on Radio City Talk. Tackling the stigma.
OK, so it's Mental Health Monday. My name's Mick. I do hope you're well. Plenty moving in the world of mental health on Mental Health Awareness Week. Feels like every week's Mental Health Awareness Week on the programme at the moment. We've been talking about it a lot, even outside of our Mental Health Monday programme. Check out Radio City Talk every weekday from 11 a.m. for Liverpool Live, where we touch on things which are happening in the news. And so very often things that are happening in the news are starting to really bleed into the world of mental health, and people are really talking about it. We're joined now on Mental Health Monday by a guest who was on the podcast and on the show not so long ago, actually, but he was on the phone. And we always say to people, if you're ever around Liverpool, make sure you come and visit us at the top of the Radio City Tower. And often they do. Mark Williams is such a person. Mark, great to see you. Thank you for your time. You're from Fathers Reaching Out, various organisations that you get involved in when it comes to mental health and mental health awareness. And you're in town today. And here you are, the Radio City Tower. Not bad, is it?
Not bad, no. It's a lovely view up here as well. It's absolutely fantastic.
It's a lovely part of the world, particularly when the sun is shining, as it is while we speak today. When we spoke on the programme, we were talking about dads in particular. That cross-section of society which has mental health issues as well. Time and time again, we hear about young men in particular, 16 to 25, 16 to 30. When you talk about dads, what sort of age are we talking about? Because people now can become dads if you're one of the Rolling Stones well into your 70s.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, exactly. We don't talk about the young dads, the 17, 18-year-old dad, which, as we know, when it happened to me, I was 30 years of age, when all this pressure of that transition to the fatherhood, and then your partner's got postnatal depression, severe postnatal depression, and then you could give up work, look after her, the baby, and then that, so you can imagine a young dad, and it must be very hard, especially this time. So it's hard times. I think it's... things, what you find with fathers especially, it comes with depression. It looks different than women. So, for instance, it'd be a lot of anger, perhaps a lot of drinking as well, where before the baby was born, that may be not the case. So we got to look at the behaviours of the father, not just what he is doing.
Is there anything about the fact that, families now, often families are starting as people reach their early 30s, whereas in the past, it will be, perceived to be absolutely normal to be 18, 19, 20 and have a couple of kids. I wonder whether or not maybe, our lifestyles are such now in the 21st century that you might live a certain life and a certain way of life throughout your 20s, and then parenthood comes along and it's such a sea change to what you've been experiencing, that maybe that's an experience which previous generations haven't had because their changes come at different times or has been more progressive as they've grown older.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of pressure today to be a parent as well. Social media has got a big part to play, as we know. And I know my father, was a miner. He used to put food on the table and, and look after us. And that's all he was, meant to do, in his mind, So today it's a lot differently. I think more fathers want to stay home. The mother's going to work. The pressures, like 200,000 single fathers, let alone, So, but when you talk about the questions, it is. I think it's a lot harder today, I think.
Do you think the choices that are available to people, as you say, your dad, he had his job, that was his job, and that was society's view of what that job should be on behalf of the father. I wonder whether or not now there's the idea that there's an option, that you can choose to do things in a certain way. But for a lot of people, it's not the reality.
Yeah.
You've got to go to work, you've got to earn the money because the bills have got to be paid and the mortgage has got to be paid. So as much as we'd like to have this idea that, paternity leave is increasing, shared family leave and all that kind of stuff, when it comes down to it, for a lot of dads out there, it's just the norm to have to just go to work.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think my own personal experience, what happened when I had to give up work, to look after my wife who was severely ill, that had a massive impact on my mental health, so I couldn't get out and do my, what I was told to do, and provide for the family, and then that social aspect around it, which is talking. I couldn't talk to anyone really, around that time. So, I think it's really important. I think mental health, as we know, is improving, awareness. But I think what I do tell men is, just if you are struggling, make sure you go and get the help. That's the most important. Because they really do get that help. The quicker the recovery will be then.
Because of the nature of the programme, often people who speak to us have had positive mental health stories in that they have had a problem and they've spoken out, they've found help. Does anyone ever say to you, Mark, well, I tried to speak and, they got, they faced a brick wall or they faced, derision. I mean, it's not a story that we've heard on this programme yet in terms of that sort of thing, but that must happen because there's a huge misunderstanding about mental health out there.
Oh, absolutely. I think a lot of these men in general, going into services like for drink, drugs, anger, and even violence in some cases as well, when in fact the underlying, could be trauma or some sort of depression or, I was diagnosed at 40 with ADHD, a condition I've had all my life in school, in 80s, it was never picked up in school. So that was my final diagnosis, really. And obviously, I was postnatally depressed, during that time, So, from the impact of my wife's illness, as well. But certainly, I think, we know about the rates amongst men who are taking their lives as well. I think it's if there's anyone out there worried about it's going to impact on their work, because a lot of fathers will say, or men, they say, oh, well, it might be on my record in work, with a GP. Seriously, I work in mental health. I've come out 6 years ago that I had depression. Honestly, just go to get help. You're the most important person.
Absolutely. Matt Williams is with us. He's here in the studio, founder of Fathers Reaching Out. He's a dad who's battled mental health issues as well following the birth of his own children. You mentioned social media. Social media, it's a bit of a game, isn't it, for some people, but it's amazing how often it comes back as a theme, as being a reason why people have negative experiences when it comes to their own mental health. What sort of things have you seen? What sort of things have people told you about how they perceive things like Facebook and Instagram and Twitter?
About mental health, is it? Yeah. Do you know, I've been lucky. I've had a really good response from my community. I'm a youth worker, so I think I was already in the community anyway, there doing my work. If I'm honest, I was one of those people who didn't know what mental health looked like, years ago. How can anyone get depressed? I was exactly that person, so I do challenge you, and I always say, well, just DM me and I can explain it to you, So I think, but yeah, it is, even postnatal depression in men, that's even a bigger taboo, in social media.
And I think one of the things as well is that, it's how we view social media. Because one of the big things that comes back to us is people say, oh, people always portray their lives as being, fun and exciting and exotic or whatever.
Yeah.
And they don't tell a different story. But it's in the same way when you get your holidays, photos back, the ones where nobody's smiling or the ones where, someone's smudging the camera, they're the ones that go in the bin, or get deleted. So it's not a surprise that people put the happy photos on there, the ones where things look great and exciting. But it's how we then perceive
Absolutely.
it. It's how we then look at those and go, oh, their family life is perfect. Instead of thinking, these are just the photos they've chosen to show us from this day out at the beach or this, walk in the countryside or whatever it must be. So we've almost got to reprogram our own head to think about social media.
Yeah, definitely. Like the material stuff, especially we see the flashy car and the house, big house and all that. And some of these families I've actually spoken to before they put their post on. And seriously, it ain't like that. Honestly, it really ain't so. It's not as happy as people think it is on Facebook. And people see me on TV, radio and all that stuff now and again, but I have my days as well. I put the post. The good thing about social media, for me, to make awareness, I've got to get myself out there. So that's why I do use social media. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't use it so much.
Do people just presume, oh, Mark, he's all right now? He had problems, now he doesn't have problems. And look, he's on the telly, he's on the radio and all that kind of stuff. He must be absolutely fine. Do you feel that sort of need to almost check yourself and kind of go, right, well, I know I'm in this position now, but I'm on a journey and I'm still on a journey? Yeah,
and for me, I'll always be on a journey, I think, because obviously I always look after myself with his fitness, healthy eating, and I only a couple of months ago I had a bad day, a couple of bad days, not a day where you just get fed up, a really bad day, when I could feel it a little bit. Okay, I need to pull myself back here, so yeah, it's an ongoing. But at least I know the triggers, and that's the most important. Is finding those triggers, and then reassessing yourself, and then just moving on. Then.
And in terms of when people often say we'll only be in a good place when we treat mental health in the same way you treat a broken leg, but I've noticed quite a lot recently that the language that gets used around mental health, things like addiction, people who might be addicted to something like alcohol, even if they're 15, 20 years dry or clean, they still refer to themselves as an alcoholic. Whereas if you break your leg, you never refer to yourself as still having a broken leg.
Yeah, exactly.
You had a broken leg, it got fixed, and now your leg isn't broken anymore. Do people come to you and say, I had depression and now I don't? Or do they say to you, I had depression and I still get waves of those types of feelings occasionally? Because it doesn't stop, does it? Or in your experience?
No, exactly. I think when my wife's postnatal depression happened, obviously it had an impact on and I was depressed. Obviously, I had depression, and it took me 6 years of struggle in silence, if I'm honest with you, and I had a breakdown. And then my wife's depression come back now, because now she was looking after me, and that's one of the reasons why as I campaign for a more holistic approach. But it's an ongoing thing, I think, and I think I got the skills, and my wife's got the skills now, so we can prevent it. And I think we should be talking about it, like physical health, really. So, or any other illness. We always talk about illnesses where how to prevent it. So we should be talking about it or how to prevent it, even if we haven't got anxiety, depression, or PTSD. So at least we'll have some education if somebody in the family's got it, and also if it does happen to us in the future. So we need to be talking about. Everyone's got mental health, good or bad. That's all I always say. We got to talk about mental health as we all got mental health, but some of us got it good and some of us got it bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, thank you for your time today. Great to see you at the top of the Radio City Tower. You got time to take some photos before you got various meetings around about town. If people want to find more information about the work that you're doing in your story, I think we mentioned it all last time you're on the podcast, which people can download the previous episodes, but you're on social media as well. Where can people find you? Yeah,
it's Mark Williams, FMH, and if you just Google Mark Williams Fathers Reaching Out, you can see the work I'm doing as well.
Mark Williams, thank you for your time. Founder of Fathers Reaching Out, and our guest today on Mental Health Awareness Week, special edition of Mental Health Monday on Radio City Talk. Mark, thanks for your time.
Thank you, thanks.
Radio City Talks Mental Health Monday with Mick Coyle.
Yeah, you might be hearing a lot in the news this week about mental health stories, Mental Health Awareness Week. Waiting time targets for mental health treatment need to be urgently reviewed, according to a children's charity. Bernardo's say the 18-week limit doesn't apply to all under 18s, with some going a year or more before receiving help. It also wants the next government to ensure all schools have a counsellor. That's a story about from Bernardo's in regard to children's mental health. And what about this from the Prison Reform Trust? And we've got a little bit of time in forthcoming weeks to talk about this. And maybe you've got an insight into it yourself. You can offer your own thoughts. This has really shocked me. I don't know whether or not I've misread the figures or I'm misreading the figures. The number of prisoners who've tried to take their own lives is apparently significantly higher than the general population. Figures from the Prison Reform Trust show 46% of women and 21% of men behind bars have tried to do so. 46% of women and 21% of men behind bars have tried to take their own life, compared to 6% of people outside of jail. So if you're a woman and you go to prison, according to that, you're nearly 50-50 as to be driven to the point where you're thinking about taking your own life. That strikes me as particularly high. The figure's round about 1 in 5 for men and significantly lower, although still 6% for people outside of prison. The organisation, that's the Prison Reform Trust, wants the next government to deal with a rapid decline in safety and standards in prison. That's how they're seeing the issue there, but you can see how I've linked that to mental health. If there's a story that you want to talk about or you think something we've touched on the programme is relevant to you, do drop us an email and tell us about it. Tell us why you want to get involved. If you want to be a guest on the programme, then absolutely we're keen to hear from you. My email address never changes. It's mick@radiocity.co.uk. That's mick@radiocity.co.uk.
Radio City Talks Mental Health Monday with Mick Coyle.